My name is Claire Anderson. I'm 31 years old. And while I was barely functioning through the devastating grief of losing my husband David in a tragic construction accident, my mother-in-law Janet Anderson convinced me to let her help manage the $675,000 life insurance payout that was meant to secure my children's future, then secretly transferred every penny to renovate her own home while telling the entire family that I was too emotional to make rational financial decisions and that David would want his parents to be comfortable. What Janet didn't know was that while I appeared broken and compliant during those dark months of mourning, I had been quietly documenting every fraudulent transaction and building a federal case for embezzlement and fiduciary fraud that would ultimately cost her everything she had stolen, plus devastating legal consequences that would destroy her reputation and financial security forever. The morning that changed my life forever started like any other Tuesday in March, with David kissing me goodbye at 6:30 a.m. as he headed to his job as a structural engineer for Morrison Construction. The same routine we had followed for the 8 years of our marriage since meeting in college and building the kind of partnership that felt unbreakable and permanent. He was working on a major commercial project downtown, overseeing the installation of steel beams for what would become Seattle's newest office complex, the kind of challenging engineering work that he loved and excelled at, despite the inherent dangers that we both understood but never really discussed. "I love you, Claire," David had said that morning. The same words he spoke every day, but which would take on devastating significance when they became the last words I would ever hear from the man who had been my best friend, partner, and the father of our 2 beautiful children. "Tell Emma and Jake that Daddy will see them tonight, and maybe we can work on that treehouse project this weekend if the weather cooperates." The treehouse had been David's latest project, with our 7-year-old daughter, Emma, and 5-year-old son, Jake, an elaborate multi-level structure that he was building in the massive oak tree in our backyard, complete with rope ladders, a pulley system for hauling up supplies, and windows that he had salvaged from a renovation project at work. The kids were obsessed with the treehouse progress, asking daily when it would be finished, and making plans for the adventures they would have in their own private fort high above the ground. The phone call came at 2:47 p.m. while I was folding laundry and listening to Emma practice piano after school. The mundane domestic routine that would be forever marked as the moment when my world collapsed and everything I thought I knew about my future disappeared in an instant of devastating news that no amount of preparation could have made bearable. "Mrs. Anderson, this is Dr. Rebecca Martinez from Harborview Medical Center." The voice on the phone was professional but gentle, clearly trained in delivering the kind of news that destroys families and changes lives permanently. "I need to inform you that your husband David was involved in a serious workplace accident and has been brought to our emergency department. You need to come to the hospital immediately." The drive to Harborview was a blur of panic, fear, and desperate hope as I arranged for my neighbor, Mrs. Peterson, to watch Emma and Jake while I rushed to the hospital, praying that whatever had happened to David would be survivable and that our family would emerge from this crisis intact and grateful for another chance to appreciate how precious our time together really was. But the moment I saw Dr. Martinez's expression in the hospital waiting room, I knew that my desperate optimism was about to be shattered by news that would leave me widowed at 31, with 2 young children, and a future that looked nothing like the life David and I had planned together. "Mrs. Anderson," Dr. Martinez said, her voice filled with the kind of professional compassion that somehow made the terrible news even more final and devastating. "I'm so sorry to tell you that David's injuries were too severe for us to save him. A steel beam shifted during installation and struck him before anyone could warn him of the danger. He died instantly and wouldn't have suffered." The information that David was gone felt both impossible to accept and devastatingly real as I tried to process the reality that the man I had been married to for 8 years, the father of my children, the person I talked to about everything from grocery lists to retirement dreams, would never come home again, and that our family had been permanently broken by an accident that lasted seconds but would affect us forever. Have you ever received news so devastating that your mind simply refuses to accept it, leaving you floating in a strange state between your old life and a new reality that seems too terrible to be true? That's exactly what I experienced as Dr. Martinez continued explaining the accident details and hospital procedures, while I sat in that waiting room trying to understand that David was really gone, and that I was now a single mother facing a future I had never imagined or prepared for. The days following David's death were a blur of funeral arrangements, insurance paperwork, legal consultations, and the overwhelming logistics of managing a family crisis while trying to help Emma and Jake understand that their father wouldn't be coming home and that our lives had changed in ways we were all still trying to comprehend. The funeral service was held at St. Mark's Lutheran Church, where David and I had been married, and where we had brought the children for baptisms and holiday services throughout our years together. The church was packed with David's colleagues from Morrison Construction, our college friends, neighbors, family members, and community members who had known David as the kind of person who helped others without expecting recognition, and who always made time for his children, despite the demands of his engineering career. David Anderson was the kind of man who made everyone around him better. Pastor Williams said during the eulogy that captured the essence of who David had been and why his loss was so devastating, not just to our immediate family, but to everyone who had been touched by his kindness and integrity. He was a devoted husband, a loving father, a skilled professional, and a friend who could be counted on to help with anything from moving furniture to providing engineering advice for home renovation projects. The service was beautiful and meaningful, but it was also emotionally overwhelming as I sat in the front pew with Emma and Jake, trying to comfort them while dealing with my own grief and the terrifying uncertainty about how we would manage as a family without David's income, his daily presence, and his partnership in all the decisions and responsibilities that come with raising children and maintaining a household. David's parents, Janet and William Anderson, had flown in from Phoenix immediately after hearing about the accident, and they had been staying at our house and helping with funeral arrangements, childcare, and the numerous practical tasks that needed to be handled during those first impossible weeks after losing him. "Claire, honey, you don't need to worry about anything right now, except taking care of yourself and the children," Janet had said repeatedly during those early days, her voice filled with what seemed like genuine concern and maternal support during the most difficult period of my life. "William and I are here to help with whatever you need, and we're going to make sure you and the kids are taken care of financially and emotionally." Janet Anderson was 58 years old and had worked as a real estate agent in Phoenix for over 20 years, so she presented herself as someone with financial expertise and business experience who could help me navigate the complex process of life insurance claims, estate settlement, and financial planning that would be necessary to secure Emma and Jake's future as a single mother with limited income and no experience managing large sums of money. "David was always so responsible about insurance and financial planning," Janet continued, "and I know he would want us to make sure that life insurance money is handled properly so that you and the children will be secure for years to come. You shouldn't have to worry about financial decisions while you're grieving. That's what family is for." The offer of help seemed both generous and necessary, since I was struggling to function at even the most basic level while dealing with the overwhelming grief of losing David and the practical challenges of single parenthood. I was barely managing to get Emma and Jake dressed and fed each day, let alone dealing with insurance companies, financial planning, and the complex legal and administrative tasks that come with settling someone's estate and planning for long-term financial security. The life insurance payout was substantial, $675,000 from David's policy through Morrison Construction, plus an additional $125,000 from a personal policy we had maintained independently. The money represented financial security that would allow me to pay off our mortgage, cover the children's educational expenses, and maintain our standard of living despite the loss of David's $95,000 annual salary as a structural engineer. "This money is Emma and Jake's future," I had said to Janet during one of our discussions about financial planning. "David always said that if anything happened to him, he wanted to make sure the kids could go to college, and that I wouldn't have to worry about losing the house or struggling financially while raising them alone." Janet nodded sympathetically and assured me that she understood the importance of preserving the insurance money for the children's benefit and long-term family security. "That's exactly why you need professional help managing these funds," she said. "This is too much money for someone without financial experience to handle alone." especially while you're dealing with grief and single parenthood. The suggestion that I needed professional help was both reasonable and intimidating, since I had never managed more than our regular household budget and savings accounts, and the thought of being responsible for investment decisions and financial planning with such a large sum felt overwhelming during a time when I could barely manage daily routines and basic decision-making. "What I'm going to do," Janet proposed, "is set up a temporary management arrangement where the insurance money is placed in accounts that I can oversee until you're in a better emotional state to make long-term decisions about investments and financial planning. This will protect the money from any impulsive decisions you might make while you're grieving, and it will ensure that Emma and Jake's future is secure." The arrangement seemed both protective and appropriate, given my emotional state and lack of experience with large-scale financial management. Janet presented the temporary management proposal as a standard approach that financial advisors often recommended for people who had received substantial insurance payouts during times of crisis and emotional vulnerability. But what I didn't understand at the time was that Janet's offer of help was actually the beginning of a systematic theft that would drain every penny of my children's inheritance, while I was too devastated and overwhelmed to recognize the warning signs of financial exploitation and fraud. The process of transferring the insurance payout to accounts under Janet's management seemed legitimate and well-documented, with official paperwork, bank signatures, and financial institution procedures that gave me confidence that the money was being handled professionally and securely. Janet had arranged meetings with bank representatives, insurance adjusters, and financial advisors who explained the various options for managing and investing the funds to ensure maximum growth and security for long-term family needs. "Mrs. Anderson, your mother-in-law has extensive experience with real estate investments and financial planning," the bank representative had assured me during one of our meetings to establish the management accounts. "And this type of temporary oversight arrangement is common for insurance beneficiaries who need time to process their loss before making major financial decisions." The banking professionals were courteous and thorough, explaining the account structures, investment options, and management procedures that would govern how the insurance money was held and invested during the period when Janet would be making financial decisions on behalf of my family's interests. But what I didn't realize was that the temporary management arrangement that Janet had established actually gave her complete control over the insurance funds, with the legal authority to make investments, transfers, and expenditures without requiring my approval or even my knowledge of how the money was being used. During the first few months after David's death, I was so overwhelmed with grief, single parenthood, and the basic challenges of daily survival that I rarely asked Janet for specific updates about the insurance money or questioned her decisions about how the funds were being managed and invested. "Everything is going smoothly with the financial management," Janet would report during her regular phone calls from Phoenix. "The money is being invested conservatively to ensure steady growth, and you don't need to worry about any of the details while you're focusing on healing and taking care of Emma and Jake." The reports were vague but reassuring, suggesting that the insurance money was growing safely and would be available whenever I was ready to resume direct control over my family's financial planning and decision-making. Janet's tone was always confident and maternal, conveying the impression that she was handling complex financial matters with expertise and dedication that I should be grateful to receive during such a difficult time. But as months passed and I began to emerge from the deepest phase of grief, I started asking more specific questions about the insurance money and requesting detailed information about how the funds were being invested and what kinds of returns we were achieving through Janet's management. "Janet, I think I'm ready to start learning more about how the insurance money is being handled," I said during a phone call about 6 months after David's death. "I'd like to see statements and investment reports so I can understand what's happening with Emma and Jake's future security." Janet's response to my request for financial transparency was evasive and dismissive, suggesting that I wasn't yet emotionally ready to handle the complexities of large-scale financial management, and that premature involvement in investment decisions might lead to mistakes that could jeopardize the children's long-term security. "Claire, honey, you're still in the early stages of grief recovery," Janet said, her voice taking on a patronizing tone that should have been a warning sign about her true intentions regarding my family's financial resources. "And making major financial decisions while you're still emotionally vulnerable could result in choices that you'd regret later when you're thinking more clearly." The suggestion that I was still too emotionally unstable to understand basic information about my own family's finances was both insulting and concerning, especially since I had been managing household budgets, bills, and financial planning throughout my marriage and had never demonstrated any lack of competence in money management or decision-making. "I don't want to make any major changes," I clarified. "I just want to understand how the money is being invested and what the current account balances look like. This is Emma and Jake's inheritance, and I need to be informed about how it's being managed." But Janet continued to resist providing specific financial information, claiming that detailed investment reports and account statements would be confusing and overwhelming for someone without professional financial training, and that my requests for transparency were evidence that I was becoming obsessive and anxious about money in ways that weren't healthy for my grief recovery process. The resistance to providing basic financial information was a clear red flag that something was wrong with Janet's management of the insurance funds, but I was still struggling with grief and single parenthood in ways that made it difficult to pursue confrontational conversations or aggressive investigation of potential financial irregularities. However, as I continued to request information about the insurance money and received increasingly evasive responses from Janet, I began to suspect that my trust had been misplaced, and that my children's inheritance might be at risk from someone I had trusted to protect our family's financial security during our most vulnerable time. The first concrete evidence that something was seriously wrong came during a family gathering at Thanksgiving, 8 months after David's death, when Janet and William were visiting Seattle and staying at our house while spending time with Emma and Jake during the holiday weekend. I had been cleaning out David's home office and organizing his papers when I found a folder containing the original life insurance policy documents and beneficiary designations that clearly stated that I was the sole beneficiary of both policies, with no provisions for parental management or third-party oversight of the funds after they were distributed to me as David's widow. "Janet," I said, showing her the insurance documents, "I'm confused about something. These papers show that I'm the sole beneficiary of David's life insurance, but you've been managing the money as if you have some kind of legal authority over the funds. Can you explain how that arrangement was established?" Janet's reaction to my questions about the legal basis for her financial management was immediate and defensive, suggesting that she had been expecting this conversation and had prepared justifications for her control over money that legally belonged to me and my children. "Claire, you signed paperwork giving me temporary authority to manage those funds while you were dealing with grief and adjustment," Janet said, though I had no memory of signing any documents that would transfer legal control of my inheritance to someone else. And David always intended for his parents to be involved in major financial decisions affecting his family's future. The claim that David had wanted his parents to control my financial decisions was both unsubstantiated and inconsistent with everything I knew about my husband's views on family independence and financial autonomy. David had always been clear that while he loved his parents, he believed that married couples should make their own financial decisions without parental interference or oversight. "Janet, I don't remember signing any papers giving you control over the insurance money," I said, feeling the first stirrings of real alarm about what might have happened to my family's financial security while I was too devastated to protect our interests. "And I need to see copies of whatever documents you're referring to." But Janet was unable to produce any legitimate paperwork, showing that I had legally transferred control of the insurance funds to her management, instead offering vague explanations about verbal agreements and understanding family arrangements that wouldn't hold up under legal scrutiny or financial institution policies. The conversation was interrupted by Emma and Jake asking for help with a puzzle, but it marked the beginning of my realization that Janet's help with financial management might actually be systematic theft of my children's inheritance, disguised as family assistance during a time of grief and vulnerability. That evening, after Janet and William had gone to bed, I began conducting online research about life insurance fraud, beneficiary rights, and the legal protections available to widows whose families might be exploiting their grief to gain control over substantial financial resources. What I discovered was both alarming and empowering. Alarming because it confirmed that financial exploitation of grieving families was a common form of fraud, but empowering because it revealed that I had strong legal rights and law enforcement resources available to recover stolen funds and prosecute family members who committed financial crimes against bereaved relatives. Have you ever realized that someone you trusted during your most vulnerable time was actually taking advantage of your pain to steal from your children's future? That's exactly what I began to understand, as my research revealed the warning signs of financial exploitation that matched perfectly with Janet's behavior and evasive responses to my questions about the insurance money. The next morning, I called the insurance company directly to request copies of all documents related to the payout and distribution of David's life insurance benefits. What I learned during that phone call confirmed my worst fears and provided the first concrete evidence that Janet had been systematically stealing from my family while presenting herself as a helpful and protective mother-in-law. "Mrs. Anderson," the insurance representative explained, "the full amount of your husband's life insurance benefit was distributed to you as the sole beneficiary 8 months ago. According to our records, the check was deposited into an account at First National Bank in Seattle that was established in your name. The confirmation that the insurance money had been paid directly to me, rather than to any kind of management account controlled by Janet, proved that whatever financial arrangements she had made were unauthorized and potentially fraudulent." "Can you tell me which specific account the money was deposited into?" I asked, though I suspected I already knew the answer based on Janet's evasive behavior and refusal to provide account statements or investment reports. "The deposit was made to an account that shows you as the primary account holder, with Janet Anderson listed as an authorized signer with full access to the funds," the representative continued. "This type of arrangement is common when family members are helping to manage finances during difficult times." The revelation that Janet had been added as an authorized signer on my account, with complete access to the insurance money, explained how she had been able to control the funds without my knowledge or ongoing consent. But it also raised serious questions about how she had obtained that level of access without my clear understanding of what I was authorizing. As I hung up from the insurance company, I realized that I needed to contact the bank immediately to understand exactly what had happened to the $675,000 that was supposed to secure Emma and Jake's future, and to determine whether Janet's use of those funds constituted legitimate financial management or criminal theft from my children's inheritance. The phone call to First National Bank provided the devastating confirmation that Janet had indeed been systematically stealing from the insurance money while presenting her theft as responsible financial management and family assistance during my time of grief and vulnerability. "Mrs. Anderson," the bank representative explained after reviewing my account activity, "over the past 8 months, approximately $650,000 has been transferred from your account to various contractors, home improvement companies, and construction firms. The transfers were all authorized using the signature authority that Janet Anderson has on your account." The information was so shocking that I initially couldn't process what it meant. Janet had stolen nearly the entire insurance payout and used it for her own purposes while convincing me that the money was being safely invested for my children's future education and security. "What kind of contractors and home improvement companies?" I asked, though I was beginning to suspect that the answer would confirm that Janet had used my family's inheritance to fund personal projects, rather than any kind of legitimate investment or financial management strategy. The payments were made to roofing companies, kitchen remodeling contractors, bathroom renovation specialists, landscaping firms, and various other home improvement services. The bank representative continued, "All of the work appears to have been performed at an address in Phoenix, Arizona. The confirmation that Janet had spent my children's inheritance on renovating her own home in Phoenix was devastating and infuriating, representing a level of betrayal and theft that was both personally heartbreaking and criminally actionable under federal and state laws governing financial fraud and exploitation of vulnerable individuals. As I processed the magnitude of Janet's theft and began to understand that my trust had been systematically exploited while I was grieving David's death, I felt a combination of rage, devastation, and determination that would ultimately motivate me to pursue every available legal remedy to recover my children's stolen inheritance and ensure that Janet faced appropriate consequences for her crimes against our family. But I also realized that confronting Janet directly about her theft would likely result in attempts to conceal evidence, destroy records, or manipulate other family members into supporting her version of events, rather than acknowledging the criminal nature of her actions. Instead, I made the decision that would ultimately lead to Janet's downfall and public humiliation. I would continue appearing devastated and incapable of managing financial affairs while secretly working with attorneys and law enforcement to build a comprehensive case that would ensure maximum recovery of stolen funds and criminal prosecution for the financial exploitation she had committed against my family during our most vulnerable time. The decision to pursue legal action rather than family confrontation was both strategic and emotionally necessary, since I needed to protect Emma and Jake's future, rather than hoping that Janet would voluntarily return money she had already spent on her own home improvements and personal benefit. Over the next several weeks, I secretly consulted with attorneys who specialized in financial exploitation cases, forensic accountants who could trace stolen funds and calculate damages, and law enforcement agencies that investigated crimes against bereaved families and vulnerable individuals. The legal research confirmed that Janet's actions constituted multiple serious felonies, including embezzlement, fiduciary fraud, exploitation of a vulnerable person, and conspiracy, with potential prison sentences that could exceed 10 years plus complete financial restitution and additional damages that would far exceed the original stolen amount. But the most important discovery was that building a strong legal case would require comprehensive documentation of Janet's theft and systematic evidence of her deception and fraud, which meant allowing her to continue believing that her crimes had been successful while I gathered the proof necessary to ensure she faced maximum legal consequences. The investigation into Janet's theft revealed a level of premeditation and systematic fraud that was both shocking and legally damaging to any defense she might attempt when her crimes were finally exposed and prosecuted. Forensic accountant Maria Santos, who specialized in inheritance theft and financial exploitation cases, analyzed all the bank records and financial transactions that had occurred since David's death, and documented a clear pattern of systematic theft that had been planned and executed over many months. Mrs. Anderson, Maria explained during our confidential meeting, your mother-in-law didn't just steal your insurance money impulsively. She executed a sophisticated fraud that involved establishing unauthorized account access, creating false documentation, and systematically transferring funds while providing you with fabricated reports about investment management and financial growth. The forensic analysis revealed that Janet had begun planning the theft within days of David's death, researching home improvement contractors in Phoenix, and obtaining quotes for extensive renovations that would cost approximately the same amount as the life insurance payout that she knew would be coming to our family. The timeline shows that she was contacting contractors and planning her home renovation project before the insurance money was even distributed, Maria continued, which proves that she never intended to invest your funds for your children's benefit. She was planning from the beginning to steal the money for her own personal use. The evidence of premeditation was crucial for establishing the criminal intent that would be necessary to secure serious felony charges and maximum penalties for Janet's theft and fraud against my family during our time of grief and vulnerability. But the forensic investigation also revealed that Janet's theft was even more extensive than I had initially understood, involving not just the life insurance money, but also funds from David's 401k account, his final paycheck, and other death benefits that had been distributed to me as his beneficiary. Your mother-in-law stole approximately $720,000 in total, Maria explained, including the life insurance payouts, retirement account distributions, and various other death benefits that should have been preserved for your family's financial security and your children's future needs. The total amount of theft was staggering and represented not just the loss of immediate financial security, but also the elimination of long-term wealth that would have funded Emma and Jake's college educations, provided for family emergencies, and ensured that David's death didn't result in permanent financial hardship for his widow and children. Meanwhile, Janet was proceeding with her home renovation project as if she had legitimately acquired the funds for her improvements, posting social media updates about her exciting home transformation, and planning an elaborate housewarming party to show off the results of her stolen wealth to family and friends. Our beautiful home renovation is almost complete, Janet had posted on Facebook, along with photos of her new gourmet kitchen, master bathroom suite, and backyard deck that had been funded entirely with money stolen from my children's inheritance. William and I are so grateful for this opportunity to create the home we've always dreamed of. The social media posts were both personally painful and legally valuable, since they provided time-stamped evidence of Janet enjoying the proceeds of her theft, while demonstrating her complete lack of remorse about the impact on my family's financial security and my children's future. But the most devastating aspect of Janet's social media celebration was the positive response from extended family members who congratulated her on the home improvements without understanding that they were praising the results of systematic theft from David's widow and children. "Your house looks absolutely gorgeous," posted David's Aunt Linda. "You and William deserve this beautiful home after all your years of hard work and sacrifice." The family support for Janet's stolen lifestyle was particularly painful because it suggested that when her crimes were eventually exposed, I would face not just the challenge of recovering stolen funds, but also the social battle of convincing family members that their celebration of Janet's success was actually enabling criminal behavior and exploitation of bereaved relatives. Attorney Sarah Mitchell, who specialized in financial exploitation and inheritance theft cases, explained that Janet's social media documentation of her theft would be crucial evidence in both criminal prosecution and civil recovery proceedings. "Your mother-in-law's social media posts provide excellent evidence of her use of stolen funds," Sarah explained. "And they also demonstrate her sophisticated efforts to present the theft as legitimate home improvement that deserved family celebration rather than criminal prosecution." The legal strategy that Sarah developed was designed to maximize both criminal consequences and financial recovery, while ensuring that Janet's theft was exposed to the same family and social circles that had been celebrating her fraudulent home improvements. "We're going to coordinate civil and criminal proceedings to ensure your mother-in-law faces the full range of legal consequences for her theft," Sarah continued. "And we're going to time the legal action to occur during her housewarming party when the maximum number of family members will witness the exposure of her crimes." The timing of the legal confrontation was both strategic and symbolic, ensuring that Janet's celebration of stolen wealth would be transformed into the moment when her theft was exposed to everyone who had been congratulating her on achievements that were actually the proceeds of criminal fraud. But Sarah's most important advice was that I needed to continue appearing devastated and financially dependent while the legal case was being prepared, so that Janet wouldn't suspect that her crimes had been discovered and wouldn't attempt to conceal evidence or manipulate family members before the arrests and asset seizures could be executed. "The element of surprise will be crucial for maximum legal impact," Sarah explained. "Your mother-in-law needs to believe that her theft was successful, and that you remain too devastated to investigate or challenge her financial management." The months of secret legal preparation while appearing broken and helpless were emotionally challenging but strategically necessary. As I worked with attorneys and forensic accountants while maintaining the facade of someone too grief-stricken to understand or challenge Janet's systematic exploitation of my family's financial resources. During this period, Janet became increasingly bold in her theft and increasingly condescending in her treatment of me, apparently confident that I would never discover her crimes or possess the strength and resources necessary to challenge her authority over my family's finances. "Claire, I hope you understand how fortunate you are to have family support during this difficult time," Janet said during one of her phone calls. "Not every widow has relatives who are willing to take on the burden of managing complex financial decisions while she focuses on healing and recovery." The characterization of her theft as family support and burden was both insulting and revealing about how Janet had convinced herself that stealing my children's inheritance was actually a generous service that deserved my gratitude rather than criminal prosecution. But Janet's overconfidence in her fraud was also providing additional evidence for the legal case, as she continued to make statements and create documentation that proved her awareness of wrongdoing and her deliberate deception about the source and purpose of the funds she was using for her home renovation project. Have you ever had to pretend to be helpless while secretly preparing to destroy someone who was exploiting your vulnerability? That's exactly what I was doing as Janet planned her housewarming party to celebrate theft that she believed would never be discovered or prosecuted. The housewarming party that Janet planned was intended to be the ultimate celebration of her successful theft, with family members and friends invited to admire the home improvements that had been funded entirely with money stolen from David's life insurance and other death benefits that were meant to secure Emma and Jake's future. "You're all invited to our beautiful home for a celebration of our renovation project," Janet had posted on social media, along with professional photographs of her transformed house, that showcased the expensive kitchen, bathrooms, and outdoor living spaces that had been purchased with my children's stolen inheritance. The invitation list included dozens of family members, friends, and neighbors who would witness what they believed was a celebration of legitimate home improvement achievements, rather than understanding that they were being invited to admire the proceeds of systematic financial exploitation and theft. Janet had hired professional caterers, live musicians, and party planners to create an elaborate celebration that would demonstrate her apparent wealth and success to everyone who attended, using additional stolen funds to pay for entertainment and hospitality that enhanced her image as someone who had achieved prosperity through legitimate means. "This party is going to be absolutely perfect," Janet told William during a phone conversation that I overheard while she was making final arrangements. "Everyone will see how beautiful our home is now, and they'll understand that we've finally achieved the lifestyle we've worked so hard to build." The conversation revealed Janet's complete lack of awareness that her lifestyle had been built on criminal theft rather than legitimate achievement, and her confidence that the party would enhance her reputation rather than becoming the moment when her crimes were exposed to everyone who had been celebrating her fraudulent success. But while Janet was planning her celebration of stolen wealth, attorney Sarah Mitchell was finalizing the legal documents and law enforcement coordination that would transform the housewarming party into the most humiliating and legally consequential moment of Janet's life. "We have arrest warrants, asset seizure orders, and civil court judgments ready to be executed during the peak of your mother-in-law's party," Sarah explained during our final preparation meeting. "Federal agents and local law enforcement will serve the papers, while the maximum number of witnesses are present to see her exposed as someone who stole from her own family during their time of grief." The coordination between multiple agencies was comprehensive and professional, involving the FBI's Financial Crimes Division, local police, civil court officers, and asset forfeiture specialists, who would ensure that Janet's theft was addressed through both criminal prosecution and complete financial recovery. "Your mother-in-law will be arrested for federal charges including wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, and exploitation of a vulnerable person," Sarah continued. "And all assets purchased with stolen funds will be seized immediately to begin the restitution process." The legal consequences were appropriate and comprehensive, ensuring that Janet would face serious prison time while also losing everything she had purchased with my family's stolen money, including the house improvements that she was planning to celebrate at her housewarming party. On the evening of Janet's housewarming party, I arrived at her Phoenix home with Emma and Jake, still playing the role of the devastated widow who was grateful for family support, while secretly knowing that federal agents were positioned around the property and ready to execute arrest warrants and asset seizure orders that would expose Janet's crimes to everyone who had been celebrating her stolen success. The party was elaborate and well-attended, with dozens of guests admiring Janet's beautiful home improvements, while expressing amazement at the transformation she had achieved through what they believed was legitimate financial planning and home investment. "Janet, your house looks absolutely incredible," said one family friend. "You and William have created such a beautiful home. You must be so proud of everything you've accomplished." The compliments and congratulations were painful to witness, knowing that every beautiful improvement had been purchased with money that belonged to Emma and Jake's future, rather than Janet's personal enjoyment and social status. But as guests toured the renovated house and praised Janet's apparent prosperity, federal agents were preparing to serve the legal papers that would reveal the true source of her wealth and transform her celebration into the most humiliating exposure of financial crimes that any of the attendees would ever witness. At exactly 8:30 p.m., during the peak of the party when all guests were gathered in Janet's new backyard entertaining area, Special Agent Jennifer Martinez approached Janet with the federal arrest warrant that would end her celebration and begin her prosecution for the systematic theft she had committed against my family. "Janet Anderson, you are under arrest for federal charges including wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, and financial exploitation," Agent Martinez announced, her voice cutting through the party conversation and immediately transforming the celebratory atmosphere into shocked silence. "You have the right to remain silent, and anything you say can and will be used against you in federal court." The reaction from the party guests was immediate and dramatic, with people pulling out their phones to record the arrest while trying to understand why their celebration of Janet's home improvements was being interrupted by federal agents with criminal charges and asset seizure orders. This property and all improvements made with stolen funds are being seized as evidence in a federal criminal investigation. Agent Martinez announced to the shocked guests, many of whom were still trying to process what was happening and why their host was being arrested at her own housewarming party. Janet's arrest was swift and professional, but the impact on her reputation and social standing was devastating, as family members and friends realized that the beautiful home improvements they had been admiring were actually the proceeds of systematic theft from David's widow and children. "I can't believe Janet would steal from Claire and the kids," whispered one family member as federal agents began documenting the property and explaining the asset seizure process to the stunned party guests. The exposure of Janet's crimes was comprehensive and public, ensuring that everyone who had been celebrating her apparent success now understood that they had been praising criminal behavior rather than legitimate achievement. As Janet was led away in handcuffs, and federal agents began the process of seizing her home and all improvements purchased with stolen funds, I felt a combination of justice, relief, and sadness that reflected the complex emotions of watching family relationships destroyed by greed while finally securing Emma and Jake's stolen inheritance. The aftermath of Janet's arrest and the seizure of her home was swift and comprehensive, with federal prosecutors moving quickly to formalize charges while forensic accountants worked to trace every dollar of stolen funds and ensure complete financial recovery for my children's inheritance. Your mother-in-law has been charged with 12 federal felonies including wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, conspiracy, and exploitation of a vulnerable person. Assistant U.S. Attorney Michael Roberts explained during our meeting about the criminal case timeline. The evidence is so comprehensive that we expect her to plead guilty to avoid a trial that would likely result in maximum sentences on all charges. The federal charges carried potential prison sentences of up to 15 years, reflecting the sophisticated nature of Janet's crimes and the substantial financial damage she had caused through systematic theft of life insurance proceeds that were meant to secure my children's future after their father's death. The asset forfeiture orders have already recovered your mother-in-law's house and all improvements made with stolen funds. Attorney Roberts continued, and we're in the process of liquidating these assets to provide complete restitution for the inheritance money that was stolen from your family. The financial recovery was comprehensive and appropriate, ensuring that Emma and Jake would not only receive their original inheritance, but would also be compensated for the emotional distress and opportunity costs that had resulted from Janet's systematic theft during our time of grief and vulnerability. But beyond the criminal consequences and financial restitution, the most satisfying aspect of Janet's downfall was the complete destruction of her reputation and social standing among the family members and friends who had witnessed her arrest and learned the truth about the source of her apparent wealth and home improvements. I feel terrible that we were celebrating Janet's beautiful home without knowing that everything was purchased with money stolen from Claire and the children, said David's Aunt Linda, who had previously praised Janet's home improvements on social media. What she did is unforgivable, and I hope she faces the maximum penalties for betraying her own family during their most difficult time. The family response to Janet's crimes was overwhelmingly supportive of my decision to pursue criminal prosecution, with relatives expressing shame about their previous celebration of stolen wealth and offering assistance with childcare and emotional support during the legal proceedings. Janet was ultimately sentenced to 8 years in federal prison, with requirements for complete financial restitution and lifetime supervision upon her release, ensuring that she would face long-term consequences for her sophisticated fraud while providing maximum protection for Emma and Jake's financial security. Your mother-in-law will serve her full sentence without possibility of parole, Attorney Roberts informed me during our final meeting about the criminal case resolution, and she'll be required to make complete restitution of all stolen funds plus interest and penalties that bring the total recovery to over $850,000. The prison sentence was appropriate and satisfying, reflecting the seriousness of Janet's crimes and ensuring that she would spend years facing consequences for her betrayal of our family's trust during our most vulnerable time after David's death. The house that I eventually purchased for Emma and Jake was even more beautiful than the home we had shared with David, and it was purchased entirely with the recovered inheritance funds plus additional compensation that federal courts had awarded for the emotional distress and financial exploitation we had endured. This house represents more than just our new beginning, I told Emma and Jake as we moved into our new home. It represents the triumph of truth over deception, justice over exploitation, and the importance of protecting family rather than betraying trust during difficult times. The contrast between our legitimate home purchase and Janet's stolen home improvements couldn't have been more meaningful, demonstrating that authentic security comes from honest work and careful planning rather than criminal shortcuts and family exploitation. As I reflected on the 2 years that had transformed me from a devastated widow to a strong single mother who had successfully recovered her children's stolen inheritance, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about financial protection or family trust, but about finding strength during our darkest moments and using that strength to fight for what's right. Janet's theft had been devastating, and her exploitation of my grief had been cruel, but her crimes had also revealed her true character, and had ultimately resulted in consequences that were far more severe than if she had simply respected our family's financial boundaries and David's wishes for his children's future security. The life insurance money that David had provided to ensure Emma and Jake's security had ultimately served its intended purpose, though the path to that security had required legal battles and family confrontations that he never could have anticipated when he purchased those policies to protect his family's future. If you're reading this, and you're dealing with family members who are exploiting your grief or vulnerability to steal from your inheritance or financial resources, please know that you have legal rights and law enforcement resources that can help you recover stolen funds while ensuring that criminals face appropriate consequences for their betrayal. Financial exploitation of bereaved families is a serious crime that carries substantial penalties, including prison sentences, complete restitution, and additional damages that can far exceed the original stolen amounts, especially when family members use their positions of trust to commit systematic fraud during times of grief and vulnerability. Setting boundaries with family members who exploit your tragedy isn't cruel. It's necessary for protecting your children's future and ensuring that people who commit crimes against grieving families face consequences that might prevent them from victimizing others during their most vulnerable times. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your deceased spouse's memory is to ensure that their final gift to your family is protected from relatives who would steal that legacy for their own benefit, rather than honoring the sacrifices that were made to provide financial security for surviving family members. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had family members exploit your grief or vulnerability to steal from your inheritance or financial resources? How did you handle situations where relatives used your tragedy as an opportunity for their own financial gain while expecting you to remain grateful for their supposed help? Your story might help someone else who's dealing with similar exploitation and needs to understand that they have legal options for recovering stolen assets and demanding accountability from family members who have betrayed their trust during the most difficult times of their lives. Thank you for joining me on this journey. And remember that your financial security and your children's inheritance are worth protecting through whatever legal means necessary, even when the criminals are people who should have been supporting you during your grief, instead of stealing from your family's future. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.